So what is the right relationship to the topic of free speech in general, and specifically in considering how deep the information ecology issues are to our capacity to address anything? So I'm not going to be able to give something like an adequate answer, but I will add complexity to the problem in the way we think about it here a little bit. So it's very easy to say free speech, no censorship, because whoever has the censoring capacity then ends up just controlling everything, and we don't trust anyone that much. So free speech, and let people figure it out. And we can see why historically, and there's a kind of in the left-right dialectic that is healthy, which we don't have, and the thing that's called left and right today don't actually mean anything, right? In the US, in the counterculture movement in the 60s, the left was more for kind of radical speech and free speech, and the right had more desire to control certain things that they thought were communist or whatever. Now it's almost the exact opposite. The left has things that it wants to control that they consider hate speech. The right is more for free speech. So what we even mean by left and right are pretty broken, but let's try and take it to some foundational concepts of there are things like rights and responsibilities, or traditionalism and progressivism, that are both important, valuable, and should be in dialectic, meaning should be in some tension and in conversation where the right answer involves the consideration of their relationship, not one of the sides. But as soon as you move from dialectic between them to warfare between them, you stop seeking synthesis and you start seeking more doubled down versions of a partial view, right? So in the kind of traditional progressive thing, this is actually an important thing to understand. We should be traditionalists. Traditionalist means that there's kind of an intuition that the systems that worked for a very long time probably did for some good reasons. They probably, even though the people who are traditionalists are not thinking of it in evolutionary terms all the time, there's a sense of like, if there hadn't been some effectiveness and wisdom in it, it would have failed. And in a world where most of the other systems did fail. So why did some make it through? And we might be mistakenly thinking we understand the systems better than we do and why they worked, and we seek to change them when we're actually changing something that really worked for a long time for a reason. So let's kind of go back to the things that worked, or let's at least make sure we protect the things that have worked for a long time. That's kind of the traditional intuition, a simplified version of it. The progressive intuition is we're facing new problems that we've never faced before. And the old solutions either were inadequate as they were. There were some people that did well and some that did really bad under it. And or even if they were adequate, they're not adequate to the changing landscape. So we need progress and evolution and adaptation. Well, of course, those are both right? Like, of course, we want to pay attention to the things that worked and make sure we understand them very well before changing them. And most of the time, we understand them less well than we think. And in a new environment where there's new issues, we might need to assess these things quite differently and be able to add, be able to amend the situation. So we want a healthy dialectic, right, between traditionalism and progressivism. So with regard to free speech here, there's a kind of traditional orientation that says, hey, Founding Fathers, Constitution, total free speech. Well, in that environment, there wasn't Facebook, right? There wasn't Twitter, YouTube, any of those types of things. If I'm in the 17th century, the 18th century, and I use my free speech to its maximum in that environment where I'm shouting in a town square, maybe a few hundred people hear what I have to say. And then they can actually talk with me. We can engage, and we have more shared experience of base reality because we live in a similar area and have seen stuff, right? Now, if I share something where most of the people seeing it don't have the same shared experience, they don't live in the same area, maybe I say that I have privileged info, I saw this, or whatever it was, and this can get amplified to be seen by millions or billions of people, that's such a different situation. So the way that some people, Tristan talks about this, is that freedom of speech should not automatically equal freedom of reach. But it's not just freedom of reach, it's an algorithmic orientation to take the things that hijack people the most and upregulate those things. And so we don't see long, complex thought pieces trending anywhere near as much as we see emotionally charged, short, salacious, vehement things trending. And to understand any of these things well, they're complex enough that they need to be long and complex and kind of boring. But cognitively, we are not eating salads and healthy things. Cognitively, we're just eating French fries, right? Oriented to the maximum kind of dopaminergic hit. So is the answer that everyone should just share everything in an environment that doesn't just allow them to broadcast, but will amplify? Well, so now we can say, should the issue be freedom of speech or the regulation of those platforms? Now we start to get to the right level of granularity where we're realizing you can't think of freedom of speech independent of the media environment in which the things are being upregulated. So then we say, well, should we actually regulate freedom of speech? We've always thought that it was okay to have something like an FTC or an SEC that says you're not allowed to lie about your finances in this public filing or in this marketing. So we were okay with regulation on lying. But then as we trust the government less, the question is who is adjudicating what is a lie? And so in a situation right now where nobody really trusts at least half of the government or the other kinds of institutions, nobody would trust who's going to say what fake news is, because the left says the right's news is fake and the right says the left's news is fake, and everyone says that the institutions that the other guy follows are the corrupted ones. So then the question of, well, who gets to adjudicate what is true? Well, that becomes the most powerful force in the world. And then all the most powerful forces have maximum incentive to become that and to capture it using all of the covert influence and whatever tools that they could possibly have to do that. So the easy censor answers and the easy just keep total free speech within this context answers are both silly, right? The issue is actually pretty complex. In order to be able to adjudicate, we need to trust the adjudication process. Well, that's again like a state regulating a market. Here it's a market of ideas. And it's a state that would maybe, like whether it's an SEC or an FTC, that would be able to regulate, but you need a people who can regulate to make sure this is actually true and honest and doing an effective thing. So again, the basis of the answer is actually, again, a collective enlightenment that has people who can sense make well enough to be able to say, how would we go about approaching these things?